Hello, everyone. So, to answer one of the first discussion questions about building our community, what happens when someone says something that I guess makes me angry, that just completely strikes against my history and makes me want to check out? Well, oftentimes, unfortunately, I do check out. It just makes me feel like, for example, when people say, I don't see the color of people's skin, I don't like to talk about race because that's not how I judge people. I judge people on individual personalities. When people say that, it really makes me angry. And it makes me not want to have a discussion with them. It almost makes me feel like, what is the point of arguing, I guess, or what is the point of criticizing that very opinion, much less going anything beyond that, is pointless because they've already made up their mind that race isn't an issue, and so there's no point in discussing it. As Lord says in an article, they don't understand that difference is that raw and powerful connection that we all share that makes it topics such as race, such as sex, so good to talk about because we are different, because we can bring our own viewpoints and our own histories into it. So I guess I check out. And sometimes that's not an option. And what happens when it's not an option, I guess voice my opinion, but not always constructively. I lash out sometimes because I do take it personally, especially when they go against my very own history. I feel like it's a personal attack, and it becomes less about a valuable discussion and more about, I guess, about my personal feelings on a subject. And I don't think that's wrong. I think that if I feel offended, and if anybody feels offended by what somebody else is saying, they should tell them that. They should call them out on the fact that they are saying something wrong. But I think there's a way of making it constructive for both parties, like especially if it's something said out of ignorance, maybe, or something that they obviously didn't mean for it to be offensive. It just came out that way, and they just didn't even know. So how do we voice a difference of opinion in constructive ways? Well, I think the first step is to acknowledge that we don't know everything. Acknowledge our own ignorance. Preface, especially if you're talking about a subject that you don't know much about, preface that subject, preface that sentence or whatever you're about to say with, I have no experience in this. I have no personal experience in this, and I completely wrong, but this is what I think. Or this is my opinion on this subject. And just understanding that sometimes your opinion doesn't mean as much as you want it to, or it doesn't hold as much merit as somebody whose identity you are talking about. And voicing a difference of opinion, legitimizing what people are saying, I guess, especially in a class like this where nobody is intentionally saying something racist or sexist or classist or ageist or heterosexist or ableist. This is acknowledging that they might feel a certain way, but that it's either wrong or maybe they just didn't voice it the way they should have. And voicing your opinion in a way that, again, if you don't know much about that subject, you identify that, and then also don't make it seem like, don't attack them for it, I guess, for that momentary lapse of judgment or that momentary ignorance. And how do we make sure that each of us is participating and doing our share? I guess the best way is to make sure that each of us feels included. I know, going back to the earlier question, if people sometimes feel like something strikes against their history or it makes them angry, they can't, like I did, like I say I felt, they feel like they can't be participating in it. And so I guess identifying when somebody might feel that way, when they checked out because they heard something they didn't like or that really hurt them personally, make sure that we bring them back in, even if later on we realize what we said might have caused something like that, being like, oh, to anybody that I hurt with my comments, I really apologize. I didn't know something like that would maybe bring people back in, make them feel like, okay, I have a place to speak now. And so I think that's the way that we can make sure each of us is participating, is just making sure that we engage in discussion, even if it offends us. And then if you offend somebody with what you said, if you say something messed up, making sure that you recognize that you did and apologizing for it, so that people feel like it's, again, a space where they are included and they can say what they think and what they know. And a way to get to know each other online, I guess, is to, well, this is how I do it. I like to show videos rather than writing, and I know there'll be a time when I have to write, but I think really listening to one another, not just reading, but really listening to what people are saying, what they write or what they say in a video, but also being an active participant is a way that people will get to know you. If you are just phoning it in and phoning in your answers and phoning in this discussion about any discussion about race or sex or any of the like, people aren't going to get to know you. People aren't going to get to know your opinions. People aren't really going to get to know what you think about certain things. And so not only do people really have to listen and really pay attention to what people are saying, but us ourselves have to really make sure that we're giving 100% of ourselves, of what we think, of our opinion, of our history, so people can get to know us and so people can really realize where we're coming from. And we're trying to build an intellectual community where we all feel like we have a place to voice our opinion, to talk about our personal histories, and where we feel like no matter like what we say about ourselves, we will not be judged. Nobody will, I guess, view us as wrong or exert their privilege over us. It pretty much exert their privilege over us, where we feel like we're all equal because of our differences. We're all different, obviously. We all come from we all have different histories, but that is what makes us great, and that's what makes us special, and we can all come together in the end and talk about it equally, I guess. And in this particular class, we're studying the voices of women of color because historically they are the ones that are often left out of these conversations because of their histories, because women of color, not only are they women, but they're women of color. Women of color often suffer the most poverty, and so they suffer from classism. Oftentimes they, I guess pretty much when it comes to privilege, they lack a lot of it. We lack a lot of it. I lack a lot of it, because of who we are, because of what we look like, because of the color of our skin, or because of how we identify. And so this course specifically is to bring up these particular voices, because historically, even within feminist movements, they haven't gotten it. Even within, as Peggy McIntosh said, growing up, she was taught to, see racism only as individual acts and not as a systemic issue, not as like a big overarching system that gives, white feminism dominance. And so in this course, we identify that that's what happens, especially in feminist circles. And so we want to bring up women of color, and we want to know what they think, what we think. We want to have a space for us to share our voice, because we've never been given that space before. How does racial privilege work as a tool for oppression? And how does it impact the ability for women to work together? Well, racial privilege works as a tool for oppression because So how does it impact the ability for women to work together? Let's talk about that. The best way I can, I guess, explain that is to look at pop culture and what happened recently between the artists Nicki Minaj and Taylor Swift and Miley Cyrus. So they're all feminists, right? They all identify as feminists and openly claim to be feminists, and so they all are working for the same goal, right? That's what people like to. That's what white feminists like to say. But then white feminists disregard the racial component of of feminism, of the fact that it's different. It's different for women of color and white women, and it impacts the ability to work together. Because in this specific instance, for example, Nicki Minaj sent out a tweet about how the VMAs are racist. How if she happened to be a skinny white artist, maybe she'd get more credit for her work. It was essentially the gist of her argument. But Taylor Swift took it as a personal attack. And I don't remember the exact words, but she pretty much said, like, I thought we were in this together. Shouldn't we be talking about how it's men are at fault for this, and now not how, like, I'm at fault because I am a skinny white artist? And stuff like that. Race. Because of the fact that Taylor Swift couldn't see that it wasn't an argument against her. It was an argument about race and how artists like her, like Nicki Minaj, are left out of things because of their race, because of what they look like. And it's not about women attacking women like Taylor Swift thinks it is. So it impacts the ability for women to work together in that instance, in that, yeah, it starts off as, oh, we're all feminists, we're all in it together. But then because we're different and because we need to win our battles differently, white feminists immediately begin to see it as women of color trying to distance themselves from the feminist movement. And so it impacts the ability for women to work together in that instance. And we should approach identity from an intersectional approach, because stuff like that won't happen, essentially, so that everybody's included in the overarching feminist movement. Again, quoting Lorde, differences can't be merely tolerated. They have to be understood for what they are and used that way. Women of color bring a different argument. They have different battles to win than white women, and so they need an intersectional approach. So not only can they bring in and talk about what they suffer as women, but also as women of color, as women who are disproportionately affected by poverty, who have different problems than white women. And the advantages of this for women of color is that they get to, if we have an intersectional approach to identity, they, again, can more present how different they are than white women and how that's not a problem. So what disadvantages might this have for women of color? So I can't think of them at the moment. So if you have noticed any that I'm completely disregarding, please let me know. And what are the master's tools Lorde references, and how do they function within the women's movement she cited? And so let me just, so